Hello YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about English. Now, as an English teacher, I felt compelled to talk about this topic: British English, English and American English. And it's an interesting topic, and a lot of people have many misconceptions about this. And the reason being that I've noticed that what really goes on the internet at the moment, on YouTube particularly, is this idea of some people fighting for England and some people fighting for America, and as to which is more correct, which is more proper, which is the best way to pronounce English. And that's interesting because there is a lot of misconception. And the first thing is that before we start talking about the actual accents, we need to talk about history. We need to understand the history behind an accent. Why Americans speak this way and why English speak this way, the way they speak. So first of all, obviously I have an English accent. So, but again, I'm a linguist, so I will try to be as precise as possible and try to give you all the data, all the possible data and information about this. So first of all, I've read someone saying that American English would be more correct and more proper because it's closer to how people used to speak at the time of Shakespeare, for example. Now, that's true from one point of view and not true from another. So let's talk history for a moment. First of all, the current English accent, what people normally refer to when they talk about an English accent, is the RP, received pronunciation. That's the English taught at school, that's probably my accent, I'd say. But that's not the only accent you have in England, and never mind Britain, Great Britain. Because it's interesting how often people tell me I have a British accent. Now, it's true that England is in Great Britain, therefore an English accent is a British accent, but what a lot of people, particularly Americans, when they talk about the British accent, all they refer to is English accent, English, whereas a Scottish accent is a British accent. So at the end of the day, a British accent has a huge variety of accents within itself. So true, I have a British accent, but probably would be better to say that I have an English accent. Having said this, the current English accent, and the one that I'm using now, is a non-rhotic accent, whereas an American English accent would be a rhotic accent. Now, when we say rhotic, we mean the pronunciation or the non-pronouncing of the R. As you can tell, I don't say R, I say R. So, and this happens when the R is not followed by a vowel. So, normally an English speaker, apart from some areas that I will mention in a moment, normally most English speakers coming from England will not pronounce the R. Unless it's followed by a vowel. So I say rich, so I pronounce it because there's a vowel there, but I say car, I say bar, I say park, and I say hard. So as you can tell, when it's followed by a consonant, or when it's found at the end of a word, we don't pronounce it, or you don't pronounce it, should I say. There are exceptions even in England. The city of Bristol, for example, the Bristolian accent pronounces the R at the end. So they don't say water like I do, but they say water, so that you have the R at the end. And some places in Lancaster, I think, are like that. But most English accents do not pronounce the R. But has it always been like this? No. The losing of the R used to be part of the way people spoke, or used to speak, or well, still do, but it would be the upper class. So the nobles, for example, they would not pronounce the R. But farmers, for example, and pirates would pronounce the R. And that's one of the reasons why when you want to mimic a pirate, for example, you just say yar, yar, yar. So you're not saying anything, but you're just pronouncing the R. That makes it sound like a pirate or a farmer. It's interesting how, it'd be interesting to understand where the line is in between a pirate and a farmer. So when you actually become a pirate and when that's interesting because they kind of sound the same. But anyways, having said this, this idea of the non-rhotic English accent has been around since the 1800s. That's when it became very popular, the 1800s. It already had started before, as we can tell by some mistakes in spelling, where there was a missing R, for example, in the word parcel. This has been happening for a very long, even in ancient times, like well, not really ancient times, but it has happened already in the 1500s. But we know that was a occasional. It only happened occasionally, particularly still pertaining to the upper class. But it became popular and it was widespread in the 18th century. So, colonies that occurred, that were born and were founded before the 1800s, still have the R pronounced, like America. So, for example, Virginia is a colony which was founded in 1607. So, before the widespread of the non-rhotic accent. And that's why Americans pronounce the R at the end. They say water, they say car, for example, and port and hard and all these words like that. So I would say university, they would say university. So you have the R pronounced there. So from this point of view, we could say that the American accent, considering the R pronounced, is closer to how the English accent was long ago. Okay, so from that point of view, it's true. But the same thing could be said about the Irish accent then, because, as I said, Irish speakers pronounce the R, just like the Americans do. So from that point of view, I'm not really sure whether American would be considered closer to Old English accent. We could say Bristol accent would be closer to an Old English accent then, since they call them, the pirates from Bristol anyways. Also, we have to say that there are many other things that Americans changed. So, for example, the falling of the accent. In an English accent, you say Renaissance. Americans say Renaissance or something like that. With an English accent, you say garage. Americans say garage. So, and then there are many other things like that. Aluminium in England, aluminum in America. And probably those were variations. So, from that point of view, the American accent has gone astray, has changed itself from the main root, which was the English one. So personally, what I think is that the English accent is, considering that England is where the language was created, the English language was created, and probably would be the more proper, considering how things should be pronounced. And the reason why I say this is also for the pronunciation of the T. Now, the T in RP, in a proper English accent, is always pronounced. And it's pronounced always with the same sound, T. So I say get it, shut up. Or, for example, other things like what. Okay, the T is always pronounced, letter, better. With an American accent, normally, the T at the end is not pronounced. So you say what, you say get, for example. And another thing is that when you have double T, or T's in between, other letters, what happens is flapping. Flapping is the modification of the pronunciation of the T into a soft D. So things such as letter, or for example later, and the little D there, water. So this sound is again a modification, and I can't fathom Shakespeare speaking with flapping. So also, I have to say that in England it really depends on the accent, because again, RP always has the T pronounced, but for example in the Cockney accent, the T is not pronounced. So you do say forgot in a Cockney accent, so there is no T there, dropping of the T's, dropping of the H's, for example. So yeah, that's not very proper. I like it just as much as I like American accents, so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I don't like American accent. I like American accent just as much as I like a Cockney accent, for example. But we are talking about proper speech, and I think that the T should be pronounced if we want to speak properly. Again, what happens is that when you have double T, for example, in America you have flapping, as we said. In England, when you have Cockney accent, for example, you have another thing which is glottal stop. Now, glottal stop is when for example, a cartoon character creates the sound uh-oh. Now, this is a glottal stop. So that's what Cockneys use, for example. They don't say letter, but they say letter. They don't say water, but they say water, for example. Well, it depends. Some Cockneys pronounce the T there, but it really depends. But you do have the glottal stop occasionally in some English accents. So that's also not very proper. But I like it. It's fun. Again, so it's a very deep topic. It's not as easy as saying we still have this sound, so our English is more proper with pertaining to the R. So again, it really depends. I think that they are all valuable accents. They're all interesting accents. But as far as which one is more proper, I stand for the English accent personally. Again, I like American accent. I like American speakers. It can be interesting. It can be clear sometimes, but again, it really depends. I do have to say though that sometimes American spelling makes more sense. The way English spell, for example, words such as theatre and centre with T-R-E is obviously linked to the French spelling, whereas Americans spell it with T-E-R, which is a lot closer to the way you actually pronounce it, centre. So yeah, that makes more sense. But again, what do I do as an English teacher? Personally, I accept all accents. And as long as it's mother tongue, as long as it's a mother tongue accent. So, for example, if a student of mine comes to me and does an exam, for example, or we have a conversation, it doesn't really matter whether he's using an English accent, an Australian accent, or an American accent. As long as it's well pronounced and it doesn't make mistakes, which could make it not really easy to understand, then I consider that as valid as an English accent. That's absolutely beyond the point. Also interesting, since I've mentioned Australian accent, coming back to the idea of losing the R with non-rhotic accents. As I said, America is a colony which was founded before the losing of the R, and that's why you still have the R there. But for example, Australia and South Africa, they're both colonies which occurred in the 18th century. In Australia, we have penal transportations from England to Australia as a colonization method, and that occurred in 1778. Whereas and that's the same 1777, and that's pretty much the same for South Africa. So at that time, British pronunciation, English pronunciation already had lost the R, and that's why Australian accent and the South African accent are both non-rhotic accents. So they are a lot closer and more similar to the English pronunciation. So the losing of the R is one of the two most important things and changes that the English accent has had during history. Another one is GDS, Great Vowel Shift. That happened in the 15th century, well, it became in the 14th century. It began in the 14th century. And what that is the changing of the pronunciation of the vowels. It's a movement of vowels pronunciation. So, for example, words such as like the sound of the double O becoming a U, like boot or moon, that was not the case in Shakespearean's time. So, for example, you would read it as a O sound, and so it would actually make more sense from a spelling point of view. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why English spelling is not a coherent spelling. It used to be. It was a coherent spelling. But now we have the same spelling that was created for Old English pronunciation, but after GDS, the spelling did not change, but the vowels did, the pronunciation did. So even in Shakespeare, when you read Shakespeare, you notice that blood and moon rhyme, but they don't. I mean, even if you change accents, because with my accent I say blood, but there are some people like in Manchester, for example, in Liverpool, that pronounce it blood, but still doesn't rhyme with moon. But probably at the time of Shakespeare they were both pronounced mon and blood, which would make much more sense. So this is one of the reasons why the spelling is incoherent, no matter the accent really. But it's interesting how you do still see in some accents some remains of old pronunciation. For example, the A sound, like make and page, is again an evolutionary pronunciation vowel, because it's a change. Because in Old English that was pronounced just e, and you still so like meg, and you still find that, for example, in Northern Eastern accent in England, Yorkshire, for example. they do pronounce it that way. They say page, they don't say page. They say face, they don't say face. So from that point of view, then I would consider that one closer to Shakespearean accent. And so it really depends on the point of view. I personally think that if you want to find an English accent which is closer to Old English, then probably it would have to be in between a Bristolian pronunciation and a Yorkshire pronunciation, with the words used in standard English, which are London words and expressions. So that would probably be a lot closer to the way Shakespeare used to speak. I still have a question for you though. Do you prefer the American English, the American pronunciation, or do you prefer the English pronunciation? Please let me know in the comments below. And thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.